My name is Jeffrey Jones, and this is Analyzing Mutual Funds for Finance 451, Fall 2018. So in this project, we were asked to compare two mutual funds coming from the international funds, two coming from the domestic funds, and two sector funds, on which I chose energy and healthcare. And as you can see, most of my funds come from either Vanguard or Fidelity. And the reason why I chose these is my wife and I actually have some things invested through Vanguard, which some of the ones we're actually going to see in this project. So some of the things we're going to look at that I feel are important when looking into investing in a mutual fund is the expense ratio, the manager tenure, the long-term performance, which we have 5-year, but it can get anywhere from 5 to 10 years, even longer, and the turnover ratio. So the first one we're going to look at comes from the international fund, and all this comes from the Ameritrade website, and we're going to do a side-by-side comparison of the Vanguard International Value Fund sector, the Fidelity International Enhanced Index Fund. Looking at the expense ratio, the Vanguard has a 0.4% and Fidelity has a 0.59, which is a little bit high. Neither one of these have a load, which means we're not paying anything to be able to invest in the beginning or the end, because you can have a front load or a back load. Looking at the 5-year period, Fidelity is a little higher, but they both are pretty consistent in what they do. 5-year return, Vanguard is looking at about 5%, when Fidelity is at about 7%. Portfolio turnover, we're looking at about 34% for Vanguard and 70% for Fidelity. Now we're going to look at the management, which is pretty important. The longer that a manager's been with it, the more consistent things can be. So just kind of recapping, Vanguard also has a $3,000 minimum to be able to invest into this fund. So the manager we're looking at comes from is Sandy Naring. She comes from the Edinburgh Partners Limited, and she's been with this fund, or in charge of this, manager of this fund, since about 2008 for about 10 years. So I'm looking at the Fidelity, again, kind of recapping some things. Comes from the FMR company, which is Geo Capital Management. It's Patrick Waddell, and he's been with this since 2007, so approximately 11 years with this specific portfolio. So going back and looking at these side by side, the Vanguard International Fund has an expense ratio of 0.4% with a long-term performance of 5 years at 5.32% and a turnover ratio of 34%. Again, the manager is Sandy Nairn of Edinburgh Partners Limited, and she's been with this specific fund for about 10 years. I'm looking at Fidelity. The expense ratio is 0.59%, which is a little bit higher. The long-term performance is higher by approximately almost 2% than the Vanguard. We're looking at about 7.1%. But the turnover ratio is fairly high at 70%. And the manager is Patrick Waddell with Geo Capital Management, and he's been with this fund for approximately 11 years. So looking at now the domestic fund, we're going to look at the Vanguard Extended Market Index Fund, add more shares, and then the Fidelity Extended Market Index Fund Premium Class. These are pretty similar in comparison. We're looking at an expense ratio for the Vanguard of 0.08, while Fidelity is a little lower at 0.05. And again, neither one of these have a load as well when investing. Yes, you'll pay the commissions and stuff, but no specific fee to invest. Looking at the 5-year, again, Fidelity is a little higher in numbers, but consistently both of them do about the same. And they're both at a 5-year return of 13.11%. Portfolio turnover is equal as well at 11% for both of these, the Vanguard and the Fidelity domestic funds. Some of the things that we're looking at, again, with fees and management, just going back, expense ratio 0.08 compared to 0.05, no loads. There is an additional minimum investment of $10,000 for the Vanguard. Now looking at the manager for the Vanguard, Admiral shares is Donald M. Butler, the Vanguard Group, and he's been with this one specific fund since 1997. The manager of this fund, so almost 21 years now. We're looking at the Fidelity. Again, it's Patrick Waddell, the same as the previous one with Fidelity, and he's been with this fund as a manager since 2004, so a little longer than the previous Fidelity one, but still not as long as the Vanguard one. The last one we're going to look at is the Vanguard Market Extend. And looking at these side by side, I'm going to disregard the last part. We're looking at the Vanguard Extended Market Index, along with an expense ratio of 0.08. Long-term performance of 5 years is at 13.11%. Turnover ratio is 11%. The manager again is Donald M. Butler. He's been with the manager of this fund since 1997. Look at the fidelity, expense ratio of 0.05, so a little lower. Long-term performance is exactly the same, 13.11%, and the turnover ratio is 11%. And the manager is Patrick Waddell with Geo Capital Management. So he's managed the other fidelity one that we looked at previously. He's been with this one since 2004. So the last one we're going to look at is the energy and the healthcare fund. Both of these come from the Vanguard. So we're going to look at these side by side, and these actually have a pretty significant difference in some of what's listed. So net expense ratio is the same at 0.38% for both the healthcare and energy. Again, neither one of these have loads as well. Performance, looking at a 5-year performance. As we can see, the Vanguard healthcare definitely outperforms the energy. Has a lot more ups than downs compared to the energy. Looking at our 5-year return, we're looking at the energy is at 1.14%, while healthcare is at 15.14%, so a lot higher. Portfolio turnover ratio, we're looking at energy fund, which is at 24%, while healthcare stays pretty low at 11%. Looking at the management for both of these, again going back, looking at expense ratio is the same, no loads for either one of them. And then again, there's initial minimum for the energy of $3,000. So for the energy share, we're looking at the manager, who is James P. Stelter, and he's been with this specific fund, the manager of this one, since 2012, so not too long, approximately 6 years. While the healthcare investor is Sean M. Hines with the Wellington Management Company. He's been with this fund as a manager since 2008, so approximately 10 years, a little longer. So comparing these side by side, we're looking at the energy, which has an expense ratio of 0.38, which is also the same expense ratio as the healthcare, while long-term performance is really low at 1.14%, while healthcare outdid that at 15.38%. Turnover ratio is a little higher at 24%, while healthcare stayed fairly low at 11%. And the managers, James P. Stelter, who's been with them since 2012 for the energy, so a lot newer than Sean M. Hines, who's been with the healthcare fund since 2008. So looking at these as a result, the ones that I chose to go with the international fund is the Vanguard International Value Fund. And the reason why, it has a lower expense ratio and also a lower turnover ratio. And in the domestic one fund, I chose to go with the Fidelity Extended Market Index Fund Premium class. And these were pretty similar in comparison, but I chose this one because of the lower expense ratio. And then in the sector fund, to me, there wasn't really a lot of comparison. The healthcare fund definitely did a lot better than the energy. It had a lower turnover ratio and greater long-term return. Again, that was at approximately 15% compared to a little over 1%. And the thing is, when it comes to mutual funds and what you're looking to invest in, it's really up to you. It can be, if you're more comfortable with somebody who's been managing one that's had a manager for a long time, and you're more comfortable with that, choose what's best for you. And that's why I have all these different funds, because you choose what you feel is best. And that's the reason why I chose these, because I like the lower expense ratio, lower turnover ratio, and greater return along with the lower turnover ratio. Again, that's my analysis of these mutual funds.